The dust of the Arizona Territory settled over Cinder Creek, a town built on ambition and soon to be buried by neglect. The heat of the late afternoon was a furnace blast, pressing down on the wide, unpaved street. The wind, dry and relentless, scoured the wooden facades of the buildings, making the old signs creak like weary bones. The only sound of life was the distant metallic clanking of a blacksmith's hammer and the occasional mournful bray of a strayed donkey. Silas Ghost Lane rode into town, a man who carried the desert's solitude like a shroud. He was the embodiment of the lone traveler. His black Stetson shielded a face perpetually aged by sun and worry, and his duster coat was caked with the reddish-brown powder of 100 lonely trails. His only companions were his reliable gelding, Shadow, and the custom pearl-handled Colt 45, resting low on his hip, a weapon rarely used but always feared. He dismounted outside the Silver Nugget Saloon, the most imposing two-story structure in Cinder Creek. The swinging saloon doors hung crookedly, their rhythmic thump a tired welcome. Silas tied his horse to the hitching post, the jingle of his worn spurs a sharp declarative sound in the silence. He was here for one thing, a drink and anonymity. He pushed through the doors. The air inside was thick and stale, a murky blend of cheap whiskey, stale tobacco smoke, and unwashed bodies. The interior was dim, the midday sun barely penetrating the dusty windows. The place was sparsely populated, a few grizzled prospectors hunched over cards, and a melancholy pianist playing a slow, off-key tune. The rhythmic clink of glasses and the low murmur of desperate conversation provided the soundtrack to the frontier's sad existence. Silas walked to the bar, his boots crunching softly on the sawdust-covered floor. He leaned against the polished wood, which felt sticky and cool under his gloved hand. "Whiskey, rye, straight. Keep the bottle, partner," he told the weary bartender, a man with a face like dried leather. As the bartender slid the glass and bottle across the bar, Silas slowly raised his gaze, letting his eyes adjust to the gloom. He scanned the room, a practiced habit of a man who never expected peace. His eyes stopped on a figure seated alone at a back table, shrouded in the deep shadows near the window. The figure was large, unnaturally still, wearing a wide-brimmed black hat that obscured their face entirely. A bolt of icy certainty shot through Silas. He didn't need to see a face or hear a word. The sheer weight of the presence, the way the light died around that figure, was familiar. It was the presence of a past he'd ridden 1,000 miles to escape. His hand froze on the whiskey bottle. He felt the cold truth settle in his gut. It was over. He knew exactly who was waiting in the shadows. The figure at the back table slowly raised a hand, its movement deliberate and painfully slow. The hand pointed directly at Silas. Then a low, resonant voice, cold as an iron bell, cut through the saloon's meager noise, silencing the piano and the conversation instantly. "Hello, Silas. We have a debt of land and blood. You just rode into the wrong trap. The chief is waiting for you in the shadows." The name, spoken with such cold finality, was enough to stop Silas's heart. The saloon fell into a terrified, utter silence. The shadow figure was no mere man. It was Black Ridge, a legendary massive Apache warrior, known for his brutal efficiency and his fierce loyalty to the Chiricahua people. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be 100 miles away, leading his tribe. Silas slowly turned, his fingers twitching near the Colt's grip, but he held his stance, knowing any quick move would lead to his death and the likely massacre of everyone in the saloon. He looked Black Ridge in the eye, or where his eyes should be, obscured by the hat. "Black Ridge, ain't seen you in 5 years. Thought you forgot my face," Silas said, his voice quiet but steady, a practiced mask of indifference. "The land does not forget, Pistolero," Black Ridge replied, using the Spanish term with chilling emphasis. "And the land you trespassed upon is now stained by the railroad's greed. You gave them the map." He stood, his immense height dominating the saloon. He wasn't armed with a rifle, but carried a long, razor-sharp hunting knife in his belt. a weapon that spoke of close quarters, personal violence. The bartender, terrified, flattened himself beneath the bar. The gamblers scattered, scrambling toward the doors. Blackridge paid them no mind. His focus was entirely on Silas. I didn't give them anything. I drew the map, yes, but I destroyed it. They must have followed my tracks, Silas argued, finally reaching for his whiskey and taking a slow, defiant sip. He needed to buy time. Lies of the white man, Blackridge scoffed. The iron horse is building its rails across the crying mesas, our sacred ground. You are the only white man alive who knew the true path. You are the scar on the land. He spoke a short, sharp command in Apache. Suddenly, the saloon doors burst inward, and the windows shattered as more than a dozen Apache warriors flooded the saloon. They were armed with traditional bows and modern Winchesters, and they moved with silent, calculated purpose, surrounding Silas completely. They hadn't come for a fight with the town. They had come for him. Blackridge pointed to the door. The tribe demands your blood, Silas Lane, but the chief, Red Hawk, demands truth. You will ride with us alone to the Ghost Canyon. You will face the trial of the scar. Lie, and your death will be slow. Tell the truth, and the land will decide your fate. Silas looked at the rifles pointed at his chest, then at the massive, unforgiving face of Blackridge. He knew he was powerless here. He was surrounded by a force that moved with the precision of the desert wind. He slowly unbuckled his gun belt, letting the heavy leather and the Colt fall to the sawdust floor with a muffled thud. You got me, partner, Silas conceded, raising his hands. Lead the way to this canyon. I've been running from the truth for 5 years. Maybe it's time I finally faced it. As Blackridge seized the reins of Shadow, leading Silas out into the fading daylight, the sound of the piano resumed, not the melancholy tune, but a single, dissonant, heavy chord. As Silas was being led away, he saw a fleeting glimpse of motion at the corner of the saloon. A man in a dark suit, clearly not one of the townspeople, was watching from the shadows of the livery stable, his face cold and impassive. This was no simple tribal vendetta. A second, powerful entity, a spy from the railroad or a bounty hunter, was tracking the whole exchange. Silas was bound and mounted on Shadow, his hands tied tightly to the saddle horn. The ropes chafed his wrists, a constant rough reminder of his captivity. The Apache war party, a dozen strong, rode out of Cinder Creek with swift, silent efficiency, led by Blackridge. The only sound was the muffled thud of their horses' hooves and the ceaseless whine of the wind. They rode deep into the crying mesas, a landscape of ancient, weathered rock formations that resembled weeping faces carved by wind and water. The atmosphere was heavy, steeped in history, and a pervasive sense of loss. This was the heart of the Chiricahua territory, land they held sacred. The air was dry and cold now that night was falling, a stark contrast to the saloon's oppressive heat. As they rode, Silas kept a sharp eye on their back trail. The fear of the cavalry or a local posse was a constant companion for any tribe, but Silas feared the figure from the livery stable more. The man was a ghost, a professional shadow. He tried to speak to Blackridge, who rode silently at his side. The man watching us in town, he wasn't a local. He wasn't a ranger. He's tracking this whole thing. You bring too much attention to your people, Chief, Silas warned, trying to leverage his knowledge of the white man's world. Blackridge remained impassive. We are aware of the coyote that follows. The white man's greed follows the trail of gold like a sick dog. Our focus is on the traitor who drew the map. I was a land surveyor for the territorial governor, Blackridge. I was ordered to map the fastest path for the rail line, Silas admitted, letting out a small piece of his truth. I drew the map, yes, but I marked the mesas as unstable, unfit for rail. I protected this land. I didn't betray it. Blackridge didn't pause, didn't slow his horse. The paper speaks louder than your words, Pistolero. The tracks are coming. They cut deep into the earth, just where the Great Spirits sleep. You will answer to Red Hawk, and the trial of the scar will reveal the lie. They arrived at the ghost canyon just as the moon, a thin silver sliver, rose above the high cliffs. The canyon was a narrow, terrifying defile littered with the bleached bones of long-dead animals. A place of judgment. A large group of Apache was waiting for them, silent and formidable, surrounding the entrance. In the center, standing before a smoky fire, was Red Hawk, the venerable chief, his face etched with ancient authority and sorrow. Red Hawk approached Silas slowly, examining him with piercing eyes. The firelight danced on the chief's face and the feathers in his elaborate headdress. The sound of a single deep drumbeat began, slow and deliberate, the heartbeat of the earth. "You are the one who knows the path of the iron snake, Vaquero." Red Hawk's voice was low, gravelly, and commanding. "We demand to know why your loyalty lies with the metal and the gold, and not the spirit of the earth. You have one chance to speak your true scar." As Red Hawk spoke, a sharp, metallic clink echoed from the canyon's high rim, the sound of a rifle cartridge being chambered. Simultaneously, a thin beam of moonlight caught the lens of a telescopic sight, trained directly on Red Hawk's chest. The spy from the livery stable, a bounty hunter or railroad agent, had followed them, secured the high ground, and was now preparing to assassinate the chief, plunging the entire territory into all-out war. The sudden cold glint of the telescopic sight reflecting the moonlight on the rim rock was a moment of agonizing clarity for Silas. He knew the threat was immediate and lethal. The single click of the rifle mechanism had gone unnoticed by most of the tribe, but Black Ridge, standing closest to Silas, caught it instantly. Black Ridge's massive hand slammed down on Silas's shoulder, a crushing weight. "The coyote strikes! Where is his position, Vaquero? Speak or you die now!" Silas, though bound and terrified, didn't hesitate. He knew the Apache's lives, and the fragile peace depended on his immediate action. He strained his eyes toward the rim, locating the faintest outline of the shooter against the dark sky. "High rim, north side Black Ridge, near the split boulder. He's aiming for the chief." Black Ridge shoved Silas hard toward the fire, barked a sharp command, and then, with unnatural speed, drew his hunting knife and disappeared into the shadows, beginning his impossible climb toward the assassin. Red Hawk, unflustered by the commotion, maintained his rigid posture, knowing that moving would confirm the shooter's target. He looked at Silas, his eyes demanding more than just identification. "You helped us, Pistolero. Now tell me the purpose of the tracker. What does the white man seek with the death of our leader?" "He's not a bounty hunter, Chief. He's a railroad syndicate agent." Silas gasped out, his heart hammering. "They want your land cleared cheap. If they kill you, they provoke a war. War is expensive, but a successful war is the fastest way to wipe out all opposition and claim the mesas for the tracks. They want a land grab, not a duel." Red Hawk absorbed this truth, his face hardening with grim understanding. The white man's treachery was deeper than he had imagined. He barked a series of commands. Immediately, half the warriors dispersed, moving to secure the canyon exits, while the other half took up defensive positions, their Winchesters aimed at the ridge. On the rim, the silence was broken by a frantic, brutal struggle. The clang of metal hitting stone, a guttural cry of pain, and then a heavy, sickening thud. Black Ridge had reached the agent. A moment later, the Sharp's rifle, the agent's weapon, clattered down the rocks and landed near the fire. The silence returned, thicker and more profound than before. Black Ridge reappeared on the rim, a colossal silhouette against the moon. He threw the unconscious, bleeding railroad agent over his shoulder like a sack of grain and began his descent. The Apache warriors watched in grim silence. The agent, wearing a well-tailored, expensive suit, was a stark symbol of the outside greed that had invaded their sacred land. Black Ridge tossed the agent into the center of the circle, where he lay still. The giant Apache then walked over to Silas, cutting his bonds with a single, precise flick of his hunting knife. "You spoke the truth, Pistolero. You saved our chief. Now, you must choose the fate of the railroad agent. This is your final test, the judgment of the fire. Do you demand his blood, or do you demand his truth? The railroad agent, a man named Creed, was roused and dragged to his knees before Red Hawk and Silas. The firelight played across his terrified, bloodied face. The air crackled with a powerful emotional tension, the fate of one white man resting in the hands of another, under the judgment of the Apache tribe. "You know the law of your people, Pistolero," Red Hawk stated, his voice heavy with ancient authority. "This man came to bring war and steal our land. Our law demands his death, but you saved our lives. Your new code is now linked to our old code. What is your judgment, Caleb Rust?" The chief used Silas's real, forgotten name, a recognition of his true identity. Silas looked at the bound agent, a man who represented the cold, corporate greed he had run from. He could demand his death, the easy, brutal justice of the frontier. But that was the justice of his past, the one that had made him shoot an innocent child. He had to demand a higher justice. "His death won't stop the Iron Snake, Chief. His death is just cheap payment," Silas said, his voice hard. "He will lie about the map, and my truth will be lost. I demand his truth. I demand he write down the full truth of the railroad syndicate's plan, the land they want to steal, the prices they promised, and the names of the men in power. He will sign it and you will release him." Red Hawk looked at Silas with deep intensity. "You demand a future weapon, not a past revenge. A difficult choice. You ask for a scar that cannot be easily healed." The chief nodded to Black Ridge. "Bring paper and ink. The railroad agent will write the truth for the tribe." Creed, the agent, seeing a chance for life, quickly agreed. He wrote a detailed confession of the railroad syndicate's illegal activities, signing the document under the watchful eyes of the Apache elders. Red Hawk took the signed paper and held it high, letting the firelight illuminate the names of the powerful men. "This paper speaks the white man's truth. It is a new weapon. We will use it against the Iron Snake." But the test was not quite over. As Creed was being led away, the true spiritual moment occurred. Black Ridge walked up to Silas, his massive hand pulling the Colt 45 from the holster lying in the dust. He handed the weapon to Silas. "But first, the Pistolero still runs from the shame of his speed. The innocence he killed is the scar of his soul," Black Ridge said. "To fully heal the land, you must heal your spirit. You must give us the one thing that holds your old life and your shame, the gun." Silas looked at the Colt, 45 in his hands, the tool of his trade, the source of his shame, the only protection he had left in the dangerous world. Giving it up meant trusting completely in the Apache code of protection. As he stood there, wrestling with the meaning of his sacrifice, a sudden blinding flash of light pierced the canyon from the distance, followed by a heavy, grinding whir, the sound of an early steam-powered drilling rig. The railroad had not waited. A heavily armed construction crew had already reached the outer edge of the crying mesas, prepared to drive the rail line through sacred ground immediately. The sound of the drilling rig was the cruel, mechanical scream of the future arriving to crush the past. The railroad syndicate, relying on speed and brute force, was already attacking the periphery of the crying mesas. Red Hawk took the signed confession and handed it to an elder. "The time for talk is done. The Iron Snake is here," Red Hawk declared, raising his spear. "We protect the ancient ways. Black Ridge, lead the warriors. We will meet the machines with the strength of the mountains." Silas, still holding his Colt 45, knew the truth. An armed charge would be suicide for the tribe. The construction crew would be heavily protected, likely by mercenaries or an armed militia. The confession, while powerful, was useless in a gunfight. He had to use the one weapon the white men didn't expect, the truth of the land itself. "Chief, wait!" Silas shouted, earning the attention of the furious warriors. "I drew the map. I know the land better than their surveyor. That canyon wall, the one they are drilling, is unstable shale. If you attack with fire, they win, but if you attack with knowledge, the land will defeat them." Silas pointed to the precise location on the canyon wall where the drilling sound was loudest. "There's a natural fault line there. If you use small, precise charges, you won't kill the men, but you'll trigger a slide. You'll bury the machines, not the men. You'll stop the rail line without starting an unwinnable war. Red Hawk looked at Silas, then at Blackridge. The plan was high risk, but honorable, a way to leverage nature against industry. He gave a sharp, decisive nod. Blackridge, take 10 of our best engineers. Follow the Pistolero's knowledge. Use the earth against their metal. Silas knew he had to prove his final loyalty. He could not lead an action against his own people while carrying the symbol of his shame. He looked down at the Colt 45 in his hand, the tool of his trade, the source of his shame, the only protection he had left in the dangerous world. He slowly bent down and placed the pistol on the ground at the chief's feet. My old life is finished, Chief. I trust your code. I will not need this anymore. My loyalty is to this land. Blackridge looked at the discarded gun, a silent testament to Silas's complete surrender of his past. He nodded in respect. Then you ride with us, unarmed, coyote spirit. Silas rode with the small Apache engineering team to the drilling site. Under the cover of darkness, they used small, controlled explosives not to attack the crew, but to destabilize the fault lines Silas had marked on his old maps. The ensuing scene was not a gunfight, but a terrifying natural disaster. With a deep, grinding roar, the entire canyon face collapsed. The massive landslide of rock and earth swallowed the steam drill, the equipment, and the forward rail line, stopping the construction dead in its tracks. The construction crew, terrified but mostly unhurt, fled the area, running from the wrath of the desert. Red Hawk and the entire tribe met Silas and the engineering team at the mouth of the canyon at dawn. The air was filled with the smell of wet earth and dust. The drilling rig was a mangled ruin, buried under tons of rock. The Iron Snake was defeated, not by war, but by the land itself. Red Hawk placed his hand on Silas's shoulder. You sacrificed your weapon. You risked your life. You chose the truth of the earth over the greed of your blood. You are no longer Caleb Rust, the Pistolero. You are Stoneheart Guide, the one who guides with knowledge. The chief looked at the vast, silent mesas now safe. Justice on the frontier is complex, my son, but sometimes it means respecting the silence. Your scar is healed. You are free. Silas, standing unarmed, felt a profound emotional peace settle over him. He was no longer a fugitive running from a ghost. He was a guardian of the crying mesas, a man whose deepest shame had led him to his highest honor, finally home in the fierce, beautiful solitude of the desert. The end.